My husband said that I didn't deserve to be with him and that he needed a model, so I left him, and later life punished him. I remember that day far too clearly. Not because it was dramatic, or loud, or even violent. But because it was quiet. A kind of still, sharp silence that only comes before a moment that splits your life in two. It was a Tuesday. Ordinary, forgettable. The kind of day you don't expect anything from. I was in the kitchen, standing barefoot on cold tiles, stirring coffee that I had already let go cold. The sun was rising behind a thin veil of clouds, casting a pale, indifferent light through the window. I was thinking about making breakfast, something light, maybe toast and eggs, but the idea felt hollow. These days, everything felt like a performance with no applause at the end. He walked in without saying a word. Shirtless, holding his phone in one hand, scrolling like it was his lifeline. His attention was never on me anymore, just that small screen. That screen had become more of a companion to him than I ever was. "Morning," I said, cautiously. He grunted. Didn't look up. I turned my back to him and stared at the countertop. I didn't expect much from him anymore, but I still tried. Still clung to the pieces. Still hoped that maybe he'd notice I was trying. "You're quiet lately," I said after a moment. He exhaled, not heavily, just enough to make a point. "I've been thinking," he said. I turned to face him. "About what?" He finally looked up. His eyes were calm, but too calm. Like someone delivering bad news they've already made peace with. "About us." I don't know why my heart skipped. Maybe because deep down I had been waiting for this moment. Or maybe I had just convinced myself it would never really come. He leaned against the counter, put his phone down, and spoke without hesitation. "I don't think you deserve to be with me anymore." At first, I didn't understand. The words didn't even register. My brain froze, stalled, like it needed a minute to catch up. "What?" I whispered. "I need someone who fits where I'm going," he continued. "Someone who looks the part. I'm not trying to be cruel, but I need to be with someone who reflects the life I'm building." He didn't have to say more. But he did. "I need someone who looks like a model." "You're not that." There it was. 8 years. 8 years of sacrifice, late nights, compromises, support, and love reduced to one cold comparison. All the times I stood by him when no one else did, when his business was nothing but a dream and a stack of credit card debt, now meant nothing. I didn't speak. Not because I had nothing to say, but because anything I said would sound like begging. And I had too much pride left for that. That night, I packed a bag. I didn't cry, not then. I folded my clothes with numb hands. He didn't try to stop me. He watched from the doorway like a man observing a stranger. No emotion. No regret. Just silence. I moved into a one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It was small and plain, with a leaky faucet and thin walls. But it was mine. For the first time in years, I had space to exist without apology. The first week was hard. I kept waking up thinking I was still in our bed, reaching out for a body that wasn't there. I kept checking my phone, expecting a message that never came. I couldn't tell my friends, not yet. I didn't want to explain how I'd been replaced not by a person, but by an idea, a fantasy version of a woman he thought he deserved. But the silence started to feel different. Less like absence. More like peace. By the second week, I started to notice small changes. I slept better. I ate when I was hungry instead of waiting for him. I stopped wearing makeup just to be presentable in my own home. I began to feel real again. Like myself. Someone I hadn't seen in a long time. And then, I saw her. Late one night, I gave in to curiosity. I searched his name. His social media came up first, polished and perfect. There she was. The woman he left me for. Tall. Thin. Blonde. Perfect smile. Legs that went on forever. The kind of woman who probably didn't know how to cook, but didn't need to as someone who lived in front of the camera. I stared at the photo of them together. He looked happy. Or maybe just posed. Like he'd finally crafted the life he always thought he deserved. And for a moment, I felt small again. Insignificant. Erased. But then I looked closer. He wasn't holding her hand. He was standing beside her, yes, but there was distance in his shoulders, something tight around his mouth. He looked like someone trying to wear a suit 2 sizes too small. still trying to convince himself it fit. That night, I turned off my phone. I stared at the ceiling in my little apartment and smiled to myself. Because I finally realized something I hadn't before. He didn't leave me for her. He left me for his ego. And I was never the one who didn't deserve better. After that night, something in me shifted. I didn't have a grand revelation or some kind of movie-worthy transformation. No haircut, no spontaneous vacation. Just a quiet, steady kind of clarity that started forming in the silence. I stopped checking his social media after that. I didn't need to see his curated version of reality anymore. There was no value in torturing myself with filtered happiness. So I unfollowed him. And then I blocked him. That was the hardest part, not because I wanted to stay connected, but because part of me was still waiting for an apology. It never came. I threw myself into work. I started saying yes to projects I used to avoid because I didn't want to stay late. Now, I had no one to come home to but myself. I thought that would feel lonely, but strangely, it didn't. In fact, the silence started to feel like company, honest, dependable, non-judgmental company. One afternoon, my boss called me into her office. She asked if I'd be interested in leading a new campaign. It would come with more responsibility, more hours, and a decent pay bump. A year ago, I would have hesitated, thinking about how it might affect my relationship. But now, I said yes without blinking. That night, I took myself out to dinner. Alone. I sat by the window of a little Italian place I'd passed 100 times but never entered. I ordered a glass of red wine and pasta with garlic and olive oil, and for the first time in what felt like years, I tasted every bite without guilt. I didn't worry about whether he'd make a comment about the carbs, or the wine, or the price. I was alone. But I wasn't broken. It was around this time that people started to ask questions. Friends noticed the absence of couple photos. My sister sent a casual message, "You and Eric okay?" I ignored it the first time. But eventually, I started answering truthfully. "We're done," I said. Simple. Clean. Most people didn't ask for details. But a few did. When I told them why, their reactions were almost comical: raised eyebrows, disbelief, anger on my behalf. "He really said that to you? That he needed someone who looked like a model?" "Yes. He really did." One of my closest friends, Laura, came over with a bottle of wine and a promise not to talk about him. Of course, we talked about him anyway. That's just how it goes. "You do realize how insane that sounds, right?" she said. "You practically built that man's career with your support. And now he thinks he's outgrown you?" I shrugged. He outgrew the version of himself I fell in love with. And maybe I outgrew him too. It was true. The more time passed, the more I realized he'd been pulling away for a long time. I just hadn't wanted to see it. There were signs: the way he talked about success like it was a ladder, and people were just steps; the way he started comparing everything, including me, to some vague standard he got from magazine covers and Instagram Explore pages. A month after I left, I saw him by accident. It was in a coffee shop downtown. I had just ordered and turned around, and there he was. Standing in line, alone, scrolling through his phone like always. He looked thinner. Tired. The perfect suit couldn't hide the bags under his eyes or the slight slump in his shoulders. He hadn't seen me yet. I could have left. Slipped out quietly and let the moment pass. But I didn't. "Eric," I said. He looked up, startled. His eyes flicked across my face, searching for some version of me he used to know. I could tell he found something different. "Oh," he said. "Hey." It was awkward, that kind of awkward that fills the air like fog. I took a sip of my drink to break the silence. "You look good," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "I do?" "Yeah. Healthier. Happier, maybe." I nodded. "I am." He hesitated. "I didn't expect to see you here. I live nearby." "Right." Another silence. But this one was heavier. He shifted his weight. I could feel him wanting to say something, but not knowing how. "I saw you with her," I said calmly. "You two look well put together." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Yeah. It's not really what I expected." "No? She's different." "Pretty, of course. But different." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He looked at me again, this time with something else in his eyes. Maybe regret. Maybe recognition. I miss how easy things were with you, he said quietly. And there it was. Not an apology. Not even close. But a fragment of truth, floating between us like a ghost. Easy isn't the same as right, I said. You made your choice. He nodded. I did. I turned to leave. Take care of yourself, Eric. You too. As I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face, and I smiled to myself, not because I was glad to see him, but because I didn't feel anything I didn't want to. No bitterness. No sadness. Just clarity. He had finally said something real. And I had finally let it go. After that brief, unexpected meeting with Eric, I went back to my life with a strange kind of peace. Not joy, joy comes later, in flickers, but peace. The kind that comes when you realize you no longer have to carry someone else's expectations. In the weeks that followed, I started noticing the space around me more. My apartment was still small, still imperfect, but it no longer felt like a waiting room. It was mine. The furniture I chose, the colors I wanted. I bought fresh flowers every Friday, a little ritual just for myself. Tulips one week, sunflowers the next. Nothing extravagant, but enough to brighten a room that no longer needed someone else's permission to feel warm. At work, things accelerated. The campaign I led was a success, and for the first time, my name was mentioned in meetings without me having to speak up for it. People started seeing me not the wife of a rising entrepreneur, not someone's partner. Just me. And they liked what they saw. One evening, my team went out to celebrate. We clinked glasses at a rooftop bar, the city twinkling beneath us like a secret. I laughed more than I had in months. Maybe years. I caught myself smiling without even knowing why. That's when I realized I was healing, not all at once, but moment by moment. Still, healing isn't a straight line. Some nights, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would have taken to make him stay. Or worse, what would have happened if I had stayed despite it all. But then I'd remind myself, I didn't leave because I wasn't enough. I left because I was finally ready to be. A few months passed. The seasons shifted. Spring crept in slowly, with its tentative winds and early blossoms. On a Saturday morning, I met Laura for brunch. She arrived late, as always, hair a mess, smile unapologetic. You won't believe who I ran into last night, she said as she slid into the booth. I already knew. Eric, she confirmed. He was at this networking event. Alone. He looked weird. Off. I sipped my coffee. Off how? She hesitated, choosing her words. Like someone who's trying to act like everything's fine but forgot how to lie with his face. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Laura leaned in. You know what I heard? He's not with the model anymore. Apparently it didn't last long. Couple of months, tops. She moved out. Said he was emotionally unavailable. The irony was so loud I almost laughed. I didn't say anything cruel. Didn't gloat. There was no satisfaction in hearing that someone else had also discovered what I already knew. But there was a quiet vindication in knowing that maybe, just maybe, life was holding up a mirror to him now. After brunch, I took a walk through a nearby park. The trees were beginning to bud. There was a breeze, gentle but insistent, and for the first time in a long time, I felt weightless. Not like something had been taken from me, but like something had been given back. Freedom. Space. Self-respect. I stopped by a bookstore on my way home. Bought a novel I'd been meaning to read. On the walk back, I passed a little gallery tucked between a bakery and a florist. I peeked inside. Artwork lined the walls, soft jazz playing in the background. On a whim, I went in. The owner, a kind woman in her 50s, offered me tea and asked if I was an artist. I almost said no, out of habit. But then I paused. I used to paint, I said. A long time ago. She smiled. You never really stop. You just take breaks. Something about that stayed with me. That night, I pulled out an old box from the closet. It had been taped shut for years. Inside were brushes, tubes of paint, unfinished sketches. My past self, stored in pieces. I set everything on the kitchen table and began to paint. The strokes were shaky at first. The colors didn't blend the way I remembered. But it didn't matter. The point wasn't to make something beautiful, it was to remember that I could. Every night for a week, I painted. Sometimes abstract shapes, sometimes messy landscapes. It was like remembering a language I once spoke fluently but had forgotten over time. My hands knew what to do, even if my mind doubted. Soon, I started bringing small canvases to work. A few colleagues noticed. One asked if she could buy one. I laughed, thinking she was joking. "No, really," she said. "It makes me feel something. That's rare." I ended up giving it to her. Watching her walk away with it, holding it like something precious, felt better than any compliment Eric had ever given me. And then one evening, I got a message. Not from him. From her. The model. She found me somehow, maybe through mutual contacts, maybe sheer curiosity. Her message was short. "Hi. I hope this isn't weird. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know the whole story. He made you sound like the one who gave up. Now I understand. Just wanted to say that." I didn't reply. Not out of anger. But because I didn't need to. Her message wasn't for closure. It was confirmation. He had rewritten the story to suit his version of events, but the truth always finds a way to surface. And now, even the people he tried to impress could see through the cracks. The life he thought he wanted? It was built on image. Not substance. On projection. Not partnership. And slowly, piece by piece, it was falling apart. Spring turned to summer, and with it came a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in years. Not just the sunlight on my skin, but the warmth of belonging to myself again. I had stopped tracking his life. I no longer needed to know what he was doing or who he was with. I wasn't curious anymore. That chapter had closed. I had new habits. I painted most evenings, read on the weekends, and even started going to a local community yoga class, not because I wanted to change my body, but because it felt good to listen to it. For the first time in a long time, I was choosing things for me. One afternoon, after a yoga class, I sat on a bench outside the studio, sipping lemon water and letting the sunlight wash over my face. That's when my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. But something in me, maybe old instinct, made me answer. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then his voice. "Hey. It's me. Eric." I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to see what he would say without being led. "I know I probably shouldn't be calling," he started, but I didn't know how else to. "I don't know. Reach out." I leaned back, staring up at the blue sky. "You don't need to reach out, Eric. That part of our life is done." "I know," he said. "But I've been thinking about everything. And I guess I owe you something." I closed my eyes. An apology? Yes. I let the silence stretch. I didn't want to make it easy for him. Not this time. "I was wrong," he continued. "About you. About us. I thought success meant trading up, more money, more attention, someone on my arm who made other people look twice. I didn't realize that in chasing that, I was giving up the only person who ever really understood me." The words were sincere. I could hear it in his voice. And maybe a few months ago, they would have torn me apart. Maybe I would have replayed them in my head, wondered what it meant, considered the idea of what if. But not now. "I appreciate that you said this," I replied. "It means something. But I've moved on. I'm not the person I was when you left. And I'm not waiting for you to realize what you lost." He was quiet. "I thought I was building a dream," he said eventually. "But without you, it's just a shell." "That's your lesson to carry," I said. "Not mine." There was nothing cruel in my voice. Just calm. Finality. "I hope you find peace, Eric. Truly. But it's not going to be through me." I ended the call. Afterward, I sat still for a long time. Not shaken. Not sad. Just still. There's a strange kind of power in hearing someone admit what you already knew, but only after you've stopped needing the admission. Later that evening, I painted. I didn't sketch anything first. I just let the colors guide me. Reds, golds, a sweep of dark blue. It came out raw, chaotic, layered. I didn't try to control it. And when I was done, I stepped back and saw something that surprised me. It was beautiful. Not perfect. Not symmetrical. But beautiful in the way that pain can be beautiful when it's transformed into something honest. The next morning, I emailed a few photos of my work to the gallery owner, the kind woman who offered me tea that day. She replied quickly. "These are powerful. Would you consider a small exhibit?" My heart raced. I hadn't thought that far ahead. I had just been painting to breathe. To survive. But the idea of showing my work, of standing in a room and knowing people were seeing me, not who I used to be, filled me with something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. A month later, I stood in that very gallery, surrounded by my paintings, strangers and friends walking through, sipping wine, asking questions. Some pieces sold. Others didn't. That didn't matter. What mattered was that I had taken everything, his words, my silence, the long nights alone, and turned it into something real. Halfway through the evening, Laura showed up, carrying 2 cupcakes and a bottle of champagne in her oversized tote bag. "For after," she said. "Because you're worth celebrating." And I believed her. At the end of the night, when most people had gone and the gallery was quiet again, I walked up to the painting I had made the night after Eric's call. The one full of chaos and fire and shadow. It didn't have a name at the time. But standing there, I finally knew what to call it. Unloved doesn't mean unworthy. That's what the whole journey had taught me. His inability to love me the way I deserved said everything about him and nothing about my value. I didn't need a man who wanted a model. I needed a life where I didn't have to model someone else's version of love. The exhibit changed things. Not in a dramatic, fireworks kind of way, but like a door opening to a room I hadn't known existed inside me. People started asking about my work, about commissions. I even got a call from a small local magazine. They wanted to do a piece on emerging female artists, and I was one of the names they'd heard mentioned more than once. It was surreal. I wasn't used to being seen like that on my own, for what I created, not who I was attached to. For so long, I had played the role of the supportive partner, the woman behind the man, the quiet stability in the background of someone else's ambition. Now, I wasn't behind anyone. I was simply here. About 2 months after the exhibit, I received a letter in the mail. A real letter, hand-addressed. Inside was a short note. "I passed by your gallery show. Didn't go in. Just saw your name on the glass. I thought you'd want to know I'm starting over. Different city. Different job. No noise this time. Just trying to become someone better. I know I don't deserve a response. But if you ever wonder, yes, I regret it. I regret all of it. E." I sat with that letter for a while. Read it twice. Then I folded it and slid it into a drawer, between a few old sketchbooks and a dusty photo album I hadn't opened since I moved out. I didn't hate him. That was the strangest part. I thought I would carry bitterness forever, that I'd keep playing out arguments in my head or waiting for karma to do its thing. But the truth was, I didn't want vengeance. I didn't need him to fall apart. I just needed to know that I hadn't imagined everything. That he, too, had felt the loss. That walking away had left a mark. And it had. Still, I didn't respond. Because nothing he could say now would change the story. The ending had already been written, and I had turned the last page long before his letter arrived. One Saturday morning, Laura and I drove out of the city to a small town that held an annual street art fair. We walked for hours, sun on our faces, paper coffee cups in hand, wandering between stalls of paintings, sculptures, handmade jewelry. At one booth, I saw a print of a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, not in fear, but with her arms open wide to the wind. I bought it immediately. When the artist asked why I was drawn to it, I told her, because it looks like what freedom feels like. That night, I hung it above my bed. I had my life now. A life filled with quiet, small joys. Weekend markets. Gallery nights. Dinners with friends where I laughed so hard I forgot what sadness felt like. There were days I didn't even think about the past, not because I was repressing it, but because it no longer defined me. One evening, while waiting in line at a bookstore, I met someone. His name was Marcus. He was behind me, holding a copy of the same novel I was buying. We struck up a conversation, the kind that starts light but sticks. We walked out together, talked for 20 minutes on the sidewalk like old friends. He didn't ask for my number. He just said, "I hope I run into you again." I smiled. "You might." And I did. 2 weeks later, at the same store. A coincidence or something else? This time, he asked if I wanted to grab a coffee. We took it slow. No rush, no performances. I told him early on about my past. Not everything, but enough. He listened without interruption, without pity, without offering to fix it. He just said, "I'm glad you walked away." So was I. We didn't fall in love overnight. There were no cinematic declarations, no dramatic obstacles. Just two people learning each other's pace, finding comfort in quiet moments, building something from the ground up, not to impress anyone, not to heal anything, but just to be. I didn't need him to complete me. I was already whole. But he added to my life in the way a beautiful frame adds to a painting, not changing the art, but elevating it. One night, months into our relationship, I told him something I hadn't even said aloud to myself before. I used to think love was about proving yourself to someone. Earning it. But now I think it's just showing up honestly. Without needing to be someone else. He nodded. That's the only kind of love I want. Eventually, I opened a small studio. Nothing grand, just a bright, quiet space where I could paint, hold classes, and let others rediscover themselves the way I had. The name on the window simply said, "The Inside Light." Because that's what it had all come down to in the end. No spotlights. No applause. Just a quiet, steady light that had always been there. Waiting for me to return to it. Sometimes, people ask me if I ever hear from Eric again. I don't. I don't need to. I know who he was. I know who I became because of what he said, and more importantly, because of what I chose afterward. And now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see someone who was left. I see someone who walked away. Not because she wasn't enough. But because she finally realized she was never supposed to be less just to keep someone else feeling like more. The life I have now? I didn't just find it. I built it. Brick by brick. Stroke by stroke. Breath by breath. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end, and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.